What if nobody showed up?
I think we already proved that that's not going to happen. We already got people walking in the door. This is good.
Slowly walking through the virtual door. Welcome, those of you who are with us so far. Talking tier 2. We've been talking tier 2 a lot.
Why is that, Claire? We're just a little bit excited about something.
Yeah, I mean, excited about doing work, especially for kids for whom our base supports aren't enough. This is where my passion is. I know it's your passion, why we come together over this, and I'm certain that the people are showing up today and share that passion with us. Where are you coming from? If you can name drop, where are you at in this world?
It is an amazing world. It's always fun to see where people are coming from. What do you think? So are we going to have anybody international here this morning?
Let's see.
I guess it's morning where I'm at. Some of you, it might be afternoon. Oh, I love that name, Anne.
Good names of places coming in. Have you, there's a whole thing on the science of reading called Sold a Story or something like that on the science of reading. And I realized I was never taught like word recognition decoding skills when I was a kid. And I don't decode names of things very well. So I just kind of stare at them and don't try to.
Papa is easy. Hey, Ryan's from Delano, like in my backyard. That's awesome.
Denton. Aaron from Denton. Hello. How are you?
So should I quiz you and say, can you say Angelica's the name of where she's from in Washington?
Innowick. I know that just because I've been there. And people have corrected me when I said it incorrectly. Sammamish. I know that one too. I just love saying that. Sammamish. Gibraltar. Hi, Brittany. Welcome.
Love it. Fayetteville, that's fun to say.
That's a fun town too. Been there.
Where haven't you been?
Lots of places. I want to go to more places, meet more people.
Waco, Tia, your Waco friend is here. Yuma, Margaret, it is warm there. I wish I was in
Beaumont.
Oh, hello. Yeah. We got Beaumont's represented.
Awesome. Beaumont. I like it.
Great.
What's it like? What's the weather in Texas now? Is it warmed up? I know it was chilly there and icy.
Icy, yeah, exactly. Cold. Describe icy and cold.
Usually you could rub it in on us. Megan and I are in Minnesota. It's cold.
It is really cold. No ice. Wait, that's cold. Okay, Emma, I have to. What is cold? The definition of cold in your part of the world is what? 40s. Okay.
It's tropical.
It's tropical for here. Yeah, we'd all go out and be in our shorts if it was 40 here right now. We probably would be really. All right, Clay, we're excited to get started, right? Should we get going? Everybody that's...
I guess we are here not to just look at where people are from. We're here to host a webinar in Tier 2. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, welcome in, everybody. So glad that you are here. We are talking today about our comprehensive solution to Tier 2. We're calling it CST2. We're actually going to get started with a get to know you activity from one of our curriculas in our Tier 2 solution. So before we do that, I'll do a quick introduction and then I'll introduce Clay, and then Clay, I'm going to ask you the question. So here we go. I'm Megan Gruss, Executive Director of Implementation here at CharacterStrong, joined by Dr. Clay Cook, our Chief Development Officer. And this is one of our most favorite topics to talk about. So we're going to hopefully get you just as engaged as we are about the topic. But first, we're going to play a little game of guess which. Clay, I'm going to ask you to pick a category that is listed on the bottom.
Lots of good options, but I'm going hobbies.
Hobbies. All right. We're going to play this a little bit differently. You're supposed to answer one of the 3 prompts and then guess which one you're answering, but let's just call out the prompt. Which prompt do you want to have people answer in the chat today?
Let's go with 1. I'm curious what people do regularly.
A hobby I do regularly is. All right. In the chat, answer that one. Clay, you got to go first.
Fishing.
Fishing.
I have lots of hobbies. I won't have a hard time during retirement to fill my time because I like to do lots of things, but fishing is a pastime I really enjoy. How about you, Megan?
Love it. Oh, I'm looking at all these coming in and I'm like,
Actually, my children, I like that one. Yep, that's a fact of life when you have kids of a certain.
Parenting is my hobby. A hobby I do regularly. Well, one thing I do regularly is run. You know me, you know that exercise and running is part of my life.
Torture and hobby aren't the same thing. Actually.
I can call it a hobby because it's not torture to me. We might, number 3, a hobby that others like and I don't. Well, you can say maybe running is for you. Running is not for you, but it is for me. You like to run. All right. Love it. Look at all of this. Baking. I want the cookers and the bakers, and we'll do some yoga and sewing while we're at it and just get everything going. All right. Thanks for that in the chat. Always fun to see a little bit about who you are. Before we begin today, just know the webinar is being recorded. You're in listen only mode. Feel free to grab those links and resources that are going to be dropped in the chat and use the chat or the Q&A feature to get your questions answered. We always love to answer your questions, so please engage in the chat when you have those questions. What are we doing today? Well, during our webinar, we've got 3 key things we're going to do. First, we're going to discuss the needs that exist around Tier 2. We know that there's a need for a solution at the Tier 2 service level in school, so we're going to talk about those needs. Then we're going to talk about the research, what research says about how we get really good and effective at Tier 2 for supporting students with social, emotional, behavioral needs. And then we'll show you our CST2 solution and what it all includes and give you some learning in that, because our solution really is a mix of professional learning and development along with giving you tools to bring this work to life in your system. After we sign off today, we'll send out the resources. You'll get those slides here as a PDF. You'll also have the recording so you can watch it later. And based on the needs that you have coming into the space today, you can sign up for an additional demo or get a quote around our solution. We'll always be dropping options for you to get what you need as we wrap up. So we're going to start first with our solution. The CharacterStrong Tier 2 solution is just that. It's a full solution. It has curricula. It also has performance-based supports, but more so it has professional learning and training, teaming resources, data tools in it to get you what you need to get successful with Tier 2 all in one spot. Here's all of those components that we are strategically pulling together for you. We know that this work doesn't happen without a team. We're going to talk about some key points of teaming today. We'll also go into our 5-step problem-solving process. We know that teams need a process that's coordinated in order to do this work well. Otherwise, we're just haphazard at things. And we're going to highlight some of our curriculum components and our performance-based supports, and then end with some of the professional learning that you'll get through our solution. How many of you know the purposes of Tier 2? Drop it in the chat. If I were to come into your school today and ask, what's the definition of Tier 2 in your building or in a classroom? What is that? What would I get answers around in your school? Sometimes they're different, which is one of the things that we need to get really clear on when we enter into this work. What is ultimately the purpose of Tier 2? We need to provide early and timely and targeted support. So we're not waiting for students to fail. We ultimately need to provide support as soon as we can when that need emerges and we see that need in a student. We also need to increase the precision and the amount of support that we're providing for students. It means that we got to get better at what we're already doing and provide even more targeted supports. Either maybe that might be in a group setting or in an individual setting for students that need it. We need to figure out, do they need skills? Are they lagging in skills, or do they have the skill, but they just need to be motivated, cued, prompted to actually use those skills? And then we need to have a coordinated process. So in that team-driven problem-solving process, we actually can concretely say what we need to do throughout these stages of Tier 2 implementation to get the work right, so we're meeting students' needs in a timely and efficient way. So Clay, you're the researcher. What does the research say about Tier 2?
Yeah, the translation of it in terms of some of the existing struggles that may seem specific to the school system you work in, but they aren't really specific. They're actually pretty common. The first one is a one size fits all. We have a limited menu of interventions, and ultimately we don't match students to the most precise and likely effective intervention because we only have one or a couple interventions. Those are the only games to be played in town. So guess what students get? Because you breathe oxygen, you get check and check out, because that's the only thing we have in terms of a support. Or it could be a lunch group or a social skills training group. Those are the small subset of interventions. So it's more of a one size fits all. We see it unintentionally used to label students and create potential stigma, where we start calling students by the tier they're in. There are no Tier 2 students. So it's important to think about, how do we combat potential stigma? Tier 2 is a system of care that gets activated based on need. This is the biggest one we see. It's fragmented. There's so many tools and resources and the interventions themselves. There's so many dots to connect, but those dots ultimately get fragmented, and Tier 2 becomes more patchwork. And ultimately, we're not implementing the process with fidelity. And that runs downhill, meaning students aren't necessarily accessing quality care. Trial and error approach, we're doing our best. We're trying to, and often get in this mode of, the common cliche, we're throwing mud at the wall and hoping something sticks. And that's more guesswork. In terms of the interventions, we see a lot. There's not a method to get at the root cause and precisely tailor that. So there's intervention, what we call imprecision. There's interventions that aren't targeting the root cause for why the student's need exists in the first place. That can be problematic. Last, we see people spending a ton of time and energy on a subset of students who have higher levels of need, but they're not necessarily getting that return on investment. And so these are some of the common struggles that essentially what we're trying to do with CharacterStrong Tier 2 is address these common struggles. So educators have the tools, the resources, all in one easy access place to address each of these issues. So when we look at the research beyond this, and we start to think about, do we kick the Tier 2 can down the road and keep kicking that Tier 2 can down the road and wait until we get Tier 1 in place? Because I hear that often, and the science would say, no, we got to be moving on both fronts. So this is research we've conducted. So there's a gap between students from more privileged backgrounds versus students from historically marginalized groups in terms of discipline. Now, what do we get if we go with quality Tier 2 and without a focus on Tier 1? We can start to close the gap a little bit. Now, the next question is, what do we get when we invest in quality Tier 1, but we don't really pay attention to Tier 2? We can close the gap, often negligibly, a little bit more, but the real impact happens when schools simultaneously work on both fronts to implement both quality Tier 1 and quality Tier 2. We can virtually close the gaps. And this is the why we have modern day policy around MTSS, and why it's not just Tier 1. It's about a multi-tiered system of support. Schools get the biggest impact on outcomes by an investment in Tier 1 and Tier 2, and that's the best way to invest in prevention. So essentially, if educators believe in prevention, you got to believe in moving on both fronts simultaneously. And these types of outcomes are replicated across literacy, math, and social emotional outcomes as well.
Yeah, kind of a plug here too. We've got a webinar coming up in a couple weeks that we're going to address this. How do we move on both fronts and do them both well? And I think the key here, Clay, what you said over and over is implementation, right? We have to actually do it well and support our adults to do it. Otherwise, we're just saying we've got something that kids don't get.
So the next part is like, what's at the root cause for why students have social, emotional, and behavioral needs? And there are paradigms out there. And one of the paradigms is what's called the acquisition performance paradigm. Some students' needs exist because they have an acquisition need, which means they do not yet possess skills, social, emotional, and behavioral skills to meet the demands from the environment. They may be lagging in emotion regulation and coping skills, social skills, or executive functioning skills, and that's causing them to have needs. So they are students who would benefit from interventions that provide targeted instructional support to learn those missing skills in very precise areas. And that's where that small group instruction idea comes from. But there's another subgroup of kids, and often this is 50 to 60% of kids who have social, emotional, behavioral needs. They have performance needs that reflect more of a need for motivation. They possess the knowledge and skills, so they need interventions, not in small groups. They need interventions embedded in the environment that motivate and encourage them to consistently apply the knowledge and skills they possess. And so we're going to come back to this because this is how we can start matching students to more precise and likely effective interventions. Now, this is a truism. We always say this, probably too much. We probably need to make a t-shirt with this quote on it. Nobody would buy it except maybe Megan and me, but students can't benefit from things they don't get. I can't blame a diet that's not working or a recipe I didn't follow. Fidelity is critical to get tier 2 right. And there's two parts of fidelity. We got to have fidelity to the process, a coordinated problem-solving process, and we have to maintain fidelity to the actual interventions that students are supposed to receive. So when it comes time to answer the question, did the student actually receive the interventions as intended and as planned and shown to be effective? We can say yes. But we have to embed those interventions into a coordinated process. And so we'll talk about both the process and the supports that are needed for schools to get tier 2 right and how we think about it as part of CST2.
Awesome. So our goal here is to give you all of this. What the research says, we know that there are concerns out there. We've got implementation gaps. We have needs and systems that we have to do a better job with providing a solution for. So that's what we've done, is really get that solution all packaged up. We wish you could say, yes, you can go access it today. It'll be live at the end of April, but we're super excited to walk you through what is all included. And this is what's included in quality tier 2 processes, no matter what. We need to have, first and foremost, a team. Whether you're working on tier 1 work, tier 2, or tier 3 work, we have to have a team of people that's coming together, that is knowing what their purpose is. They have a clear vision of their work, and ultimately they're able to efficiently meet and get through that 5-step problem solving process in a really precise and consistent manner. Because as you know, some of those issues that were mentioned from Clay, it's piecemealed work. And the point that brings is we have to get our team in a way that we can actually deliver things that aren't piecemeal, but they're following that structure process. So in our solution, we've got targeted supports for readiness around your entire school. So we're going to dig in there a little bit. What do we mean by getting our school ready? We're also going to address how to really assess your effective teaming structure. How do we know if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing? And then we're going to give you tools and resources to actually do that work right. So we talk about whole school readiness. What do we mean by that? We have to have everybody in the same boat going in the same direction. We talk about that a lot, whether it's tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 work. We have to have shared clarity around what it is we're trying to do and the commitment to get that work right amongst all of the educators in our system. As we look at whole school readiness, we're going to give you resources, even PowerPoint slides here, Google slide decks that help you communicate the purpose of Tier 2, help you get your educators in your system really clear on this being a priority, get you common language, and ultimately what everyone's role is in the work in the school, because this work of Tier 2 doesn't live just within a team or within licensed professionals in the building. Everyone needs to have a shared investment in Tier 2 work. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have gaps in meeting our student needs. So we think about Tier 2 teaming. This is just a resource that we'll have for you. How do we know if we're functioning really well as a Tier 2 team? We're providing you with some fidelity rubrics that you can walk through to really assess, are we doing the right work as a team? Some resources to really evaluate who is on your team and do we have the right expertise on our team? Sometimes we get frustrated that we're not being able to meet our students' needs, or we don't have people that are showing up, and they all are interconnected. We need to sometimes take a step back and figure out, do we have the right experts on our team? What's their role on the team? And are they actually available to be here when we meet so that we can continue to move the work forward? We know that if a team that doesn't meet is not actually being effective. So we have to have those people coming together to do these things. First off, we've got to establish whole school readiness. Are we clear around this work, and are we committed to do it as an entire building? And then are we following a coordinated problem solving process? So we're going to talk through our 5 steps today, but that's then the job of your team, is to make sure that you're doing each of those 5 steps. You're gathering and summarizing your data, your proactive detection data. We're not waiting to just gather intervention response data, but we're doing it at the front end. Then we define the need for our students and develop intervention plans. We ultimately monitor their progress, both the progress of the student responding to that intervention and our adults implementing that intervention with fidelity. And then we're using the data to make decisions and ultimately know very clearly, based on a decision-making rubric, what the next steps are for that student if they're responding or not responding to the intervention. So in the chat, where are you at with these pieces with your Tier 2 teaming? Do you have some of these pieces done really well? You've honed in on them, or are there parts that you maybe need to focus on? So in the chat, what are the things that you feel as though your Tier 2 team needs to get better at? Maybe it's the whole school readiness. We actually need to recommit to what Tier 2 means in our building. Or maybe it's A, B, C, or D. Are we actually engaging in the strategic actions that will get us the result that we intend? So drop it in the chat. Would love to know. Sample meeting agendas for you. Those will be embedded in our solution so we can help you stay on point. We're not going to keep you on point. It's a tool that is going to help you stay on point if you use it well and it's aligned to the 5 steps of the process. And ultimately, it's helping you bring this process to life. So we're going to start today by digging into step 1. What does it mean to detect and triage students? And then we're going to move through these 5 steps and help you to see which solution components maybe are your greatest need and how our CST2 solution can help support you in that work. You ready, Clay?
Step 1 of the problem-solving process is really proactive detection and triage. Early intervention doesn't happen without proactive detection. So essentially, if you believe in early intervention, you have to believe in things like screening. Screening is just a proactive detection method. So the goal of step 1 is to not only proactively detect students who may, and the operative term there is may, have a need for support, and then we have to rule them in or rule them out based on their needs and resources in our school. We call that capacity, because we may end up detecting more kids who look like they have a need for an intervention than we have the capacity to serve. Getting step 1 right is really important, and there is a push into Tier 1 for some students because their needs are symptomatic of not getting Tier 1. And so we wouldn't activate a formalized Tier 2 process, and that's what we called rule out. Now we've identified a kind of a checklist, And we've organized it by what you need to prepare and then what you need to be able to enact and do to get this step right. And we have tools and resources in CST2 to guide you being able to follow through with this checklist, each of the components to say, yep, we're dialing in and refining our detection and triage process. So let me walk you through a couple of things here. Here's an image of how we go from proactive detection to triage to ultimately identifying the subset of students who we've identified as having needs in addition to tier 1, and we're now going to put them through other steps of the problem-solving process. And so we go from proactive detection. That doesn't mean we're on the hook to provide tier 2 for all students. What we are going to do is use that information in triage based on our resources and student need, and we're going to rule students in or rule them out. And then if we rule them in, then we're going to take students through the next steps of our problem-solving process. We have screeners. You may have a validated screener. If you don't, we have one for you. We've done research. We've on it established the psychometric properties. There's an established cut score for decision-making purposes. It has a total of 9 items within it. So if screening for proactive detection is missing and you're looking forward, we have the resources, not only how to prepare to administer the screener, but on the back end, how do you summarize that information and take next steps as you approach the triage process? We also have other ways to detect beyond the screener. It's called structured teacher nomination or student nomination. One of the things we need to get away from in school is just subjective teacher referral that doesn't have objective criteria upon which teachers base their referrals. So it's been shown if you provide more structure and you make it more objective by operationalizing, like externalizing needs, provide examples and non-examples, and then the teacher then sifts through each student according to those criteria to nominate students who are exhibiting behaviors consistent with an example, is a different way in between screeners. We can detect students who may have a need for support. But again, it does, even if a student gets nominated, doesn't mean thou shall now do tier 2. Just like if I'm your primary care physician and you have high blood pressure, it doesn't say thou shall now take medication or have open heart surgery. It says, hey, I should probably look into it and decide what's the best course of action. And the best course of action could be just tier 1 health behaviors.
We got a couple questions about screeners in the chat, so let's make sure that we answer those right off the bat. So grade levels is one question. Amber, you can use the strengths and needs screener for all grade levels K-12. Questions about screener versus universal screener, we're using those as the same term. So universal meaning we're giving this screener to all students. Got a question here about comparing to SABRES. And what else?
The only way to compare is to kind of look at the diagnostic accuracy. But if you look at effective validated screeners, if you already have one, then it's like you probably want to stay the course because that most of them perform similarly because they have a lot of the same content. And so, you know, there's lots of screeners out there. The goal is to have a good one with evidence behind it that cut score is a dependable one where we're minimizing false positives and false negatives. And the SABRES is a good one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Natalie, no reason to change at this point. If you already have one, no reason to change.
CST2 doesn't cause you to use the strengths and needs screener. You can use it if you don't have one, but it doesn't force you into it.
And another good question, if it's online. So any of our tools, we will not be collecting your student data. It will be downloadable. So you can download an Excel macro that will produce for you the reports and the visuals that you need for next steps for the data. So just know that it's something for you to take, use in your system, and we're not holding that for you. So you can make it work within another system if you already have one too.
Yeah, we would recommend if you don't have one, you can, like part of the CST2, you would get a screener that you can incorporate and start using, as well as guidance on how do you plan to do the screening and then interpret the data on the back end as you engage in a triage process to figure out the subset of students for whom you have the capacity to meet the needs of.
And we always say it's screening information is great. It's just one piece of data. We also need to have the back end of it, because we have the data. Now what? We have to have the system to actually support that data and to support the student needs that we're seeing it. It's not, we're not solving anything with getting the data from a screener. We have to have the back end side of what are the interventions and supports that we can strategically put in place.
And then once you have whatever detection method you need, like screeners come with a decision rule and it's called a cut score. But we can also use existing data, behavior, attendance, grades, other information, but we need very clear decision rules. Those decision rules are the thresholds that would suggest, hey, this student warrants attention to determine whether you want to rule them in or rule them out. And so getting really clear decision rules established as part of the process is really important for proactive detection and triage. And we have ways to support you to actually solidify those in your system as part of the process of proactive detection and then ruling students in or out of tier 2. These are two terms and numbers you should know. Base rate, that's the number of students who get detected as having a need by a universal screener or some other methodology. And then capacity rate is the number and proportion of kids you can actually handle well in tier 2. Often base rate and capacity rate aren't the same. When you go and do universal screening, you're likely to find more kids who look like they have a need for an intervention than you have the capacity. And we need to know those two numbers because that activates what we call triage. Because we only can handle 12% of our students, even though 22% of students, for example, were detected by our screener. And that's where triage comes in. And that's the next step once we have a list of students, is we now need to prioritize of assigning care based on student need and capacity based on our resources. And there's two things we need to do. Rule out, we ask the question, is the student's need symptomatic of not getting tier 1? What that means is the student's not sufficiently getting tier 1. And so we're going to rule them out, and it's better to push in to improve tier 1. Or is the student receiving sufficient tier 1 or the need is significant enough to warrant tier 2? That's a rule in. So triage, just like we would in a medical sense, is the process of assigning care, who needs it the most, based on our capacity and the needs that we're dealing with. And as part of step 1, schools not only need to detect, they have to triage. And it's an essential part of that step.
Sorry, Clay, I don't know what's going on. I got like blank screen and crazy mouse right now. So great job speaking to that while I was clicking through. Got some good questions in the chat regarding the triage process. Clay will work to get those answered for you here as we move on to step 2. So step 2 is define, analyze, and select. So once we're able to look at our data and ultimately be able to understand who's the subset of students that have the highest level of need, then we can match those students to an intervention, because we're able to then say we need a tool, right, to tell us what does the student have as a need. What does that need mean? Does it mean that they need skills? Does it need to mean we need to change the environment in order to help them show their skills? And then we can select the intervention that is included in the system. So we really talk about define specifically what is the student's need. We have to analyze why the need is existing, or what we call the root cause, and then ultimately selecting the intervention. When we do that, we are able to ultimately get more clarity around the student, and we can get more precise, which is exactly what we're trying to do, moving away from that example that Clay said at the beginning of throwing mud at the wall to really getting as precise as we possibly can to give the student the support that they ultimately need. So we talked about this paradigm, the acquisition performance paradigm. We got to figure out what's happening, why it's happening, and then ultimately match the student to the appropriate support. So are they going to need skill building, where that's where we've developed the skill building curriculum that you can access and deliver? Or do they just need a performance-based intervention, which means they have the skill? We don't need to teach them the skill. They just ultimately need a tweak into the classroom or the playground environment or whatever environment it is that need is existing, that we need to tweak that environment so that they can show the skill that they already have. So our tool that we provide helps you do that. Decide this or that. Is it acquisition or performance? And then ultimately match you to one of our 4 skill building curricula groups or one of the 6 performance-based intervention supports. So we're going to dig into both of these right now. We're first going to talk about our adaptive skill building curricula, where we have 4 core areas that we are giving you curriculum in that helps with the main needs that we often see at tier 2. Students that have internalizing or externalizing emotions, those groups are empowering confidence or empowering regulation. We also have social skills, we're calling that empowering relationships, and then executive functioning support, empowering self-management. So we're going to dig in here. What does this mean? What does our curriculum look like? Well, we've got 80 lessons if you're in an elementary setting and you need access to K-5. We've got 40 K-2 lessons and 43 3-5 lessons. In middle school, it's a 6-8 curriculum with 40 lessons, and high school 9-12 with 40 lessons, all around those areas that we've discussed. Secondary, it's called Empower. In elementary, it's Powered Up. And we're going to dig in to what that looks like in our sample site. So know that you can have access to these samples right now. If you're a current CharacterStrong Tier 1 curriculum user, you can log into your curriculum site and see the CST2 samples on the bottom left of your screen. If you don't have any CharacterStrong curricular resources right now, you can sign up and opt in for samples. So we're going to walk through this. Clay, this is kind of your baby. You're part of the, your huge brainchild in this solution. So why don't you walk us through?
Yeah, the goal is to have an intentional process that students get familiar with, beginning with the start intentionally. They do a temperature check out where they're at. The previous mission is something that encouraged them to apply the knowledge and skills beyond the lesson. And every group has community agreements that we want to review to create a safe and supportive small group space for learning. One of our signature things in our curriculum is connection games like we've done at the beginning. Before we jump into learning, let's allow students to connect relationally to cultivate a sense of belonging and connection. And then there's the main part of learning, it's called the grow section. And in this one, students are learning what we call brain powers. This is grounded in cognitive behavior therapy. There's scripts to make sure that any fingerprinted person who becomes familiar with this can deliver this. So from a workforce issue, we can really scan everybody on our payroll to figure out who is going to be delivering and running these small groups, because we have to get creative in our ability to increase the capacity to meet students' needs that they're bringing to the educational table. The curriculum are designed to have direct instruction, where there's explicitly teaching students skills, providing them with opportunities to practice. In this one, the 2 brain powers they learn here are called turning down thoughts into up thoughts. It's in a more jargony way, it's called cognitive restructuring. We're giving kids this tools to be able to notice certain thoughts that are unhelpful and then repurpose those thoughts to be more hopeful and productive. When there's we call it buttons, a button, it gets pushed and the strong emotion starts to show up. And so we teach students skills. Then there's the exit part of the lesson, and that's getting students to just have some type of optimistic closure. And beyond that, we have 2 sections that are called mentor And it's an extend where there's a school mentor who's embedded in the environment that supports the student to generalize what they learn outside of the small group sessions. And then we have prepackaged communications and modules that can be readily sent and to reduce the burden on the educator facilitating the group to families, so the family is able to learn alongside the student and support the student's generalization and use of that knowledge and skills outside of school. So the mentor component and the family focus component are critical supports to help kids extend what they learn beyond that group context and actually apply it. All the students, Megan's showing you here, they're develop personalized plans. So as they go through the group, ultimately the byproduct of going through those groups, not only will they learn knowledge and skills, they'll have personalized plans that outline kind of what are their buttons, how does the button show up in their brains, bodies, and behaviors. And then they're going to have what we call when-then plans. When it shows up, then what skill will I use? And we have this same type of structure, whether it's in emotion regulation and coping skills. In our social skills group, we have a similar personalized planning template, but it's tailored to social skills. And then we have a group for executive functioning, where students who have executive functioning needs identify specific tools that will help with things like keeping organized, staying focused, controlling impulses, knowing and remembering directions to be able to complete tasks on their own. And so all the lessons have a similar structure and common components.
Awesome. So we're super excited about this. Clay mentioned it, the 3 parts, just as a reminder. Not only are you accessing the small group instruction and those lessons that we just highlighted, but there's that school mentor piece and there's the family support. We know that these are pain points. How do we communicate with families about what students are accessing and really bridge that gap? And so we're providing you training and email scripts and then enacting that mentor to really help the student generalize the skills that they're learning beyond that 30-minute small group instruction time. So we just showcased you a 3-5 lesson. Obviously, it's different for in 6-8 and 9-12. We're really making them developmentally appropriate and ultimately engaging. Why high school students would even want to invest in learning more and engaging in different skills and learning more skills as they develop. Super exciting part. We know that it just gets people excited because there's not a solution out there right now that's beyond handbooks and that's really adaptive to meet your needs. And we're thrilled to be able to provide you with just a one-stop shop with the curricula components and also the targeted interventions. When we think about targeted interventions to motivate, what do we really mean? We mean that we need to take the opportunity to adjust or fine-tune the environment so the student can show the skills that they already possess. We have highlighted 6 supports within our solution: behavior contracts, check-in, check-out, class pass, pre-correction plans, school family communication system, and self-monitoring. With these, we know that we got to get really good at this tighter menu of support so that we can enact them quickly. We're not waiting 3 or 4 weeks until a team meets, but ultimately we can enact some of these supports within a couple of days. That's really high quality access to tier 2 support. So we've provided within these interventions the how-to script, how to actually deliver these supports. What does it mean to do this well with fidelity? What core components does each support have and need to be delivered by the adults that are interfacing with them? And also sample forms, so you don't have to create them, and videos, short training videos on each of the interventions so that you can ultimately go to a classroom teacher and show them a video and help them learn what ClassPass is and how to implement that really well. Here's a sample how-to script. We ultimately talk through what the students are going to benefit from, why it's necessary, the core components, kind of some do's and don'ts of the actual support. And then we give you checklists. What does it mean to actually deliver this support in a way that the student is going to benefit. So science has proven that these supports are ideal based off of the student needs. So if we've matched them to the appropriate support, the student is going to benefit if we as the adult deliver that support consistently to the student. So we've outlined the active components that are necessary to be lifted off in order for the student to benefit. Fidelity is a huge piece, as we talked about at the beginning, and we know it's also a struggle. So we've provided you some supports there. Lots of stuff coming in the chat. Keep those coming. Oh, I like that. Tracy says, sweet, I'm in heaven.
Tips and videos.
Here.
Yeah, we've tried to bake into it that all the professional learning you'll need along with it. And we'll get to here in a little bit, part of the live professional learning that's never ending as part of having CST2 solution. So the professional learning's needed to get tier 2 right, not only get it off the ground, continuously improve to get it dialed in with fidelity, and ultimately sustain that work as systems encounter things like turnover. Developing the plan is critical. If the system actually develops a plan around the precise intervention that was selected, there's an increased probability that they'll follow through and deliver it with fidelity. So we have planning documents to not only talk about the need, but to ultimately identify the core components of the intervention and identify who's responsible and by when will they follow through with those core components. That implementation planning has been shown to increase the probability of delivering it with fidelity by 4 to 5 times. Not only that, what we have here is a way to track not only when are we going to start the intervention, when do we plan to gather baseline data, we have also the baseline, the data collection process where you can at once track progress monitoring data. It automatically populates it into a graph. And then below, there's the intervention fidelity. So as you're gathering fidelity data, because we have fidelity rubrics for all of the interventions, you can then come to a conclusion. Once it's time to reconvene and make a decision, you have the data available at your fingertips, both the student progress monitoring data and the fidelity data, which you need both to make an accurate and valid decision as to what the next action step the team's going to take to continuously support the student. So this is an example of a tool. We've had some people just take these data forms and put it in their own student information management system. This is something you would download and it would be on your local device or in your system, because we don't keep all the identifiable information on ourselves. They're tools that you can access and use and integrate, or they can be just standalone tools you use.
There were some questions in the chat about data tracking, so hopefully this answers part of it. The other piece of it is that we will give you direct behavior rating scales for you to use as you get some baseline data, and then ultimately as you progress monitor, training around how to use that tool, and then obviously the system here to enter the data in and figure out whether or not your supports are working. Step 4 is this, what we're talking about. We got to gather the data, we got to start the intervention, and we got to monitor whether or not it's working. So in that form that we just showed, all of that you can see is in a little one-stop shop for you. And as Clay mentioned, you can either use the tool we provide, or you can adapt your own student information system to collect that data. But we've outlined what it is you need to gather, and then ultimately we're giving you the tools to track it and bring it to life in your system. Last but not least is step 5. How many of you in the chat have matched students to an appropriate support? You're going along, you're trying to collect your data, and then all of a sudden you come to a team meeting and you're kind of like, well, now what? How do we even know whether or not this support has worked? And what do we do now? We kind of sit around the table and we think, we don't really know. Does the student need to continue with the tier 2 support? Do they actually need to move on to tier 3? Are they doing well? And we can like fade the intervention and support, and the student can just be successful accessing quality tier 1. That is sometimes a struggle. So step 5, Clay, we're ultimately coming together to review and decide.
Yeah, I mean, it's intersecting the data. And imagine if we don't have data. What does that team meeting look and sound like? Well, if it might get awkward because it could be silent. We don't have any information. Well, or there's people who are pretty opinionated who might steer the course of whether the kid's responding and what the next course of action, and we might be fast tracking a student towards special education, when in fact the student didn't even receive the intervention. So we have to intersect both the fidelity data and the student progress monitoring data. We have decision guidelines here on how you intersect those data, and then you're essentially trying to land on what we think is the best decision as to the next action step we're going to take to continuously support the student. We're continuously supporting the student, and depending on the data, we're going to use that to steer the next step. We may go back to step 2 because the student did not respond to the intervention and we implemented the intervention with fidelity. We think we might have got the analysis. We analyzed the root cause and we selected the wrong intervention. So that's where we're going to go. We may determine, let's maintain as planned. So we're going to go back to the implement and monitor step. So this helps us make decisions about where we go back and what step in the continuous kind of problem solving process we go back to and function from moving forward.
I think one piece here that's super key is we've talked through what are our decision rules at the onset, right? How do we even know and support? We've worked on that to begin. We talk about at the very beginning, we have to plan for this work before we actually enact the work. So we got to prepare and know that when we get to some of this step, that we actually have decision rules made. We're able to use this matrix to help us support those decisions, but we're really clear from the beginning so that we're not spinning our heads when we come together. Last but not least is the professional learning part of the solution. We've mentioned it. We'll say it again. You'll get access to live professional learning. So we'll be engaging in once a month, 60 to about 80 minutes of time where you can come together and we're going to dig into specific parts of the solution to get you trained on really, really well. We just did one this week, our first one for those of our pre-sale users. We talked about teaming and triaging. We just got really deep into those two topics to help people prepare and get ready for when the solution goes live. If you decide that that would be beneficial for you and you purchase prior to the curriculum going live in April, you'll still get access to those and recordings. So we're doing live professional learning, but as we've said, there's going to be video modules, how-to videos within the solution already embedded that you can grab and play whenever you need them. We'll have them embedded into our solution. We'll ultimately also have just a database of all of the video training modules, all of the documents that you can search for, and really grab what you need when you need it for that asynchronous learning. So Clay, what do you think? Do you think our solution addresses all of the struggles that you talked about at the beginning?
Well, we can guarantee you, though, there will always be some imperfections in this. We're committed to continuous improvement of the solution. What we've tried to do is put these struggles that we know are real and common because we're out all over the country working in partnership with schools to try to get this right and have failed lots of times in partnership with schools to try to dial in tier 2. So CST2 is we're trying to solve the one size fits all by having a menu of interventions. You have to have a menu. If you don't have a menu, you have a skimpy level of support. Instead of labeling students and potentially stigmatizing them, we have to have strength-based language on how we approach providing early, timely intervention. Instead of things being fragmented and patchwork, we need to connect all the dots. We have to bring it all together and connect those dots to get it right. Instead of trial and error, we can follow a coordinated process. We have to introduce common language and dedicated practice around tier 2 and have to have a coordinated problem-solving process. And that's what we're providing with this. Instead of imprecision, we got to go to more precision by making sure we're tailoring the interventions to the hypothesized root cause. So we need a matching process. And the CST2 matching tool allows educators to begin matching students to more precise and therefore likely effective interventions. When we do all that, we can increase the probability we start to get a return on our investment, because educators are already putting in time and energy, but often not getting the return they need on that investment of time and energy. And the evidence is quite clear. If we can start getting these things right, there will be a greater return on investment, and students are the winners of that because the adults are being more efficient and effective on their support of them.
So there we have it. Here's our 5 components again: teaming, our problem-solving process, the small group curriculum, the targeted interventions to motivate, and the professional learning embedded. So we'll highlight, there's a couple questions in the chat that we'll answer here. The official launch is actually in April, end of April. However, if you purchase now, you do get access to 4 months of our readiness training that we talked about. We just delivered one here on Tuesday. We'll do another one in February, March, and April. If you decide that this is the right decision for you, you'll have access to the recordings and the tools that we did talk about this week. Or if you happen to miss one, those will live in your curriculum site for you. And you just get the added time. So if you were to purchase now, you will get access through the end of next school year, which is also a benefit. So you get the entire solution there for $19.99 a year. It's all of those components are included: the monthly professional learning and coaching, the on-demand training and resources, your readiness resources, the coordinated process, the curriculum, and the performance-based supports, scripts, and fidelity tools. So that is our CS2 solution. We're going to continue to answer questions as they come in the chat. Before we go into Q&A, we just want to always keep you abreast to what's happening, because we're so proud of all of the work that we're able to support you with here at CharacterStrong. Our goal is to give you the tools so that you all can be the heroes in your schools. So if you're interested in learning more about CST2, we have a demo coming up next week. Elementary curricula is on the 8th. The 9th is a webinar around struggling with student behavior, 3 proactive strategies to save your sanity. I have a guess, Clay, you're going to be involved in that one. Is that an appropriate guess?
It might be there.
Might be. 15th and 16th, it looks like we've got our secondary curricula demo and our live leadership demo. We also are super excited for our asynchronous MTSS summits. You can register at mtsssummit.com. That's next week, where you will have access to daily interviews with professionals, educators, researchers in the field of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 work. Excited about that. Clay's also going to be a closing keynote for a panorama Level Up Your MTSS Summit next week as well. Wow, next week is busy, Clay. Goodness gracious. We are busy. And also we've got school culture trainings, and we're super excited about these. Feel free to find more information at School Culture Training at the website at the bottom. I just hold that one, or scan that QR code if you can. I didn't know how to say dash, school dash culture dash training. That's what I should have said.
That school culture training is legit. It's about change around concrete practices that are often relationally focused and designed to promote engagement. And that's what the back end is. The staff come out of with really concrete Tier 1 practices to cultivate a culture and climate that enables things like belonging, well-being, and engagement.
Cool.
Yes, we are separate from Panorama. Yeah, we're not.
We are. We just support each other's.
Yeah, and I was invited to do a talk for their event.
Awesome. So let's get to some of those questions as we wrap up. I did see a question about the matching tool in the menu, so I'm just going to go back to the slide where we talked about our matching tool, just so you can be reminded of that visual. This matching tool, to really get precise around what support the student needs, this will be embedded in the solution for you. So basically you've triaged your students, you have your list of students that you want to move on to tier 2 support, then you're going to walk through the this or that. So do they have the acquisition or performance needs or prompts where you'll answer those? Then based on if you decide it's an acquisition need, there'll be additional questions and prompts to help you decide what group that student would benefit from the most. If it's a performance need, the same thing, you would go down and decide which of those 6 performance-based supports would be the most precise match. And so then this becomes your menu of 10 interventions and supports that you can enact very efficiently and effectively because you have it all right there at your fingertips, the 4 groups or the 6 performance-based supports. What other questions?
I see one here about, is it a yearly fee? It is a yearly renewal fee. The solutions and the information will always be improved upon and updated because we have a research continuous improvement process where we're trying to always identify the imperfections and make sure that we're making changes and improvements so it works better in the context in which people are using it. And that live professional learning is critical because it's never ending part of CST2. And that's why, like, going back to, I put in the chat and Megan touched on this, that live professional learning is worth 10 to 15,000 unto itself. Ongoing, never ending. How can you onboard new staff or continuously improve to increase your capacity? That will always be a resource you can plug into. And if you can't make the live events, those always get recorded and stored for later access and use.
Couple more questions in here. Lauren, specifically, drop what district you're from. We will have somebody reach out for our larger districts and engage in a conversation with you. Good question there. That price point is for each school, but happy to have one of our school support specialists reach out. Looks like a whole child summit, different than tier 2 training. So we've got lots of summits going on. Great question, Tracy. Let's get some clarity here. The whole child summit. When is that date actually? Is that in March, Clay? March or, oh, I don't want to speak. Maybe they'll drop it in the chat. I don't want to say. That's more on a focus this year is on mental health. We're doing the MTSS summit next week, really around structured tier 1 supports and how we implement and really solve some of the barriers that we often see in tier 1, in tier 2, and then in tier 3. So each day is based off of a tier, and that's your not so typical MTSS summit. The whole child summit, there it is. They dropped it.
Yeah, does CST2 come with K-12 materials? It's at grade levels. So elementary, middle school, and high school. Now, so if you're a unique school, like a small rural school in one building, then there are some different options to consider, given that you're like in a single building.
Awesome.
And I see one here, the structured referral, it's largely teacher facing. Now it can be parent facing, but it's really operationalizing and asking teachers to go through each and every student. So every student has an equal chance of having those more objective criteria applied to them and then just nominating the students. Often it takes a teacher anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to complete a structured teacher nomination. That shouldn't be a replacement for a validated screening instrument that has, an established cut score that has been shown to be what we call diagnostically accurate. It has really good classification accuracy.
Excellent. Keep the questions coming. We'll stay on for a few more minutes if you have questions. If not, we just appreciate you showing up today. Really, what do I do next? 1, find somebody you need to share this information with. You're going to get the recording and the slides. Feel free to talk with your tier 2 team, your administrators, MTSS coordinators, whatever support you have in your system, take it back and talk about it. Next step would then be attend one of our demos or request a quote so that we can get you the support that you need in a timely manner. Appreciate you all joining us today. Again, we'll stand for just a few more seconds. If you have any other questions, we will It's fun for you. Have a great rest of your week. It's midday Thursday where I'm at already, so we're heading into the weekend.
It's going by quick.
Some specific pricing questions there.
Hey, Holly.
Yeah, if you have some unique needs, feel free to reach out to us at info@CharacterStrong with some of those questions around pricing and your unique needs, and we can get those answered for you. Upload those in the chat. Thanks, everybody.